You heard it first live on this show last night, that England's Freedom Day is delayed until July the 19th. Now, Scotland is likely to face the same fate as England. In the last few hours, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon said there's likely to be a delay in easing lockdown restrictions there. She has said, of course, that it's a rise in cases caused by the Delta variant. She's blaming that, as well as the UK government, for its lax border controls. Oh, these dates, they do keep changing though. One thing, however, the government seems to be resolute on is that the goalposts will not be changing on the furlough dates. They've said that there will be no changes to the timetable of when they start withdrawing support, meaning that businesses who are forced to remain closed will need to start contributing to furlough payments from the 1st of July. Now, come back to the impact on businesses shortly, but first let's go to our Scotland reporter, David Donaldson. David, welcome. Now, let me ask you, we've seen tonight the First Minister suggesting that Freedom Day in Scotland is likely to be delayed. Tell us about it.
Yeah, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon's come out. She says there's going to be at least a 3-week delay. She's certainly not putting any timescale on that at all. As you say, due to the Delta variant, cases in Scotland have gone up 5 times since May. So that's obviously a huge concern and a huge bearing on the decision she's made. She's certainly not going to put any timescale on it at all. She's quite keen to see the vaccine numbers increase before taking any decision on that. I'd be very, very surprised if Scotland came out of this in the next 3 weeks. You know, some of the places in the country are still at level 2, some in level 1, other places, including Orkney and Shetland and the Western Isles, in level 0. But certainly there's huge cause for concern here. There's no doubt about that. And it's having a huge impact on businesses as well, of course, because they're struggling. They want to get back to normal business, not getting customers in, and they can't do that at the moment.
Indeed. You touched briefly there that different parts of Scotland are affected differently. How will the changes to Freedom Day affect those different parts of Scotland?
Well, Michelle, that's a very good question, and one I probably actually don't have an answer for, because I think it's very much wait and see how it goes and how numbers increase or how numbers decrease, whether it's going to be the whole of Scotland that comes out of this at once, or, which I think is probably the preferred option of Nicola Sturgeon, or whether it's going to be certain parts of Scotland coming out quicker than others, and that really remains to be seen. And as I say, it will depend on vaccinations, it will depend on the rising number of cases or decreasing number of cases.
Yeah, and I have to say, here in England, there was a YouGov poll that was conducted saying over 70% of people supported lockdown extensions. But when the Prime Minister actually announced his changes yesterday, there were a couple of things trending on Twitter which were quite insightful, which was hashtag I'm done and hashtag enough is enough. So I wonder, what has the response there in Scotland been to the suggestion of more restrictions for longer? Sorry, the same restrictions, but for longer, an extended lockdown?
Well, I think it's obviously not going to be met with great popularity. A lot of people, as you say, have had enough, whether they're in Scotland, England, Wales or Northern Ireland. They certainly people have had enough, and they've decided that, you know, that's that, and that people will start to get, restless and slightly annoyed with what's going on. But people have got to stick by these restrictions. They're there for a reason. Not everyone will, I'm sure about that, but most people, I think, probably will. And if we can wait maybe another 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and perhaps we may see some movement, some easing of those restrictions, but that remains to be seen. As I say, it's very much evident on what's going to happen in terms of numbers going up or down, and in terms of vaccinations. I think that will be very, very key in Scotland and across the country.
David, thank you very much. We'll follow the goings-on in Scotland closely and, of course, keep you updated on them. But for now, David, thank you for your time. Now, I mentioned earlier that the government will not be amending at all their timetable for furlough. Michael Gove was talking to us earlier. Let's take a look at that.
That runs into September, and one of the reasons for that is that Rishi, the Chancellor, called it right in saying, look, you know, there may be some delays. We hope there aren't, but there may be. So let's get that support in over the longer term. The second thing is that there's also a discretionary fund, money given to local authorities and others, to support particularly hospitality businesses, and there's still money in that fund. It hasn't all been drawn down, and there is some additional support that Rishi's provided as well for that sector.
So there you go. Earlier today, our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley spoke to Terry Spamer, a nightclub promoter in my own home city of Hull. Here's what he had to say about the impact on his business.
I am an event organiser and music promoter. I'm outside the legendary Welly Club in Hull, which has already been saved once after going into administration on the first lockdown. Tokyo Industries came along and saved the venue because it's such a musical institution, and it's now at serious risk of closing once more. This 4-week delay is going to be absolutely devastating for my industry. I mean, the industry estimates that £3 billion will be lost in revenue and potentially 700,000 jobs. I mean, you know, this industry has been hit harder than any other industry. 17 months it's been closed now. And you know, there's a massive ecosystem within this industry of artists, DJs, producers, sound technicians. I mean, literally thousands of freelancers that have fallen through the gap of the government support because they are freelancers, and it's just devastating. I mean, they're playing with people's emotions, people's livelihoods, people's mental health, and I just think it's disgusting.
Disgusting, there you go. Now, joining me in the studio, we have Tom Harwood, and also joining me, we have Cameron Leslie, who is the co-founder of the nightclub Fabric, which employs 130 people. Julian, tell me, what is the impact of these delays on your business?
Sorry, was that for me, Cameron?
Yes, sorry, Cameron.
Sorry.
No idea who Julian is, that's just what my screen says, but you are indeed Cameron. So Cameron, tell me, what is the impact for you?
Well, I mean, we were gearing up for a big reopening, relaunch a week on Friday, the 25th. You know, a venue like Fabric can't be switched on in a week or two. That sort of curation of the kind of events that we put on, you know, we're putting on events for up to 7,000 people every weekend in central London. And those kind of venues like us take a long time to get ready for. Mothballing after 15 months, we completely dismantled our team at the back end of last year when we had absolutely no sight of a reopening date. And to put those kind of things back together takes so much time, and to be 10 days away from a relaunch like that, to then have to put that whole infrastructure on hold is really, really complex and damaging for us.
So, Cameron, what will you do then? So we've been given these new dates. Are you you mentioned the time frame involved in your work and what you do. Will you launch on the date that now you can, or will you delay it a little bit until you've got something that you're ready to go with? What does the reopening timetable in your mind look like for your you personally, your business?
Well, I don't think we can say exactly right now. We've been meeting today, we've been discussing what our options are and exactly how we're going to sort of go back out. Obviously, we've got 4 weeks of ticket holders. Many of the events, up to 4 events a weekend, were sold out. So we've got to get the communication right for our ticket holders. Ideally, we'll be able to put those events into different slots later in the next few months. And if we can't with the artists that we had scheduled, we're going to have to obviously offer refunds to anybody that wants it, and roll over the events, and hopefully people can roll their tickets over into the events as we sort of reschedule them.
And before I go to Tom, Cameron, I've got another question for you. Have you managed to do anything at all during these lockdowns? Have you been able to do anything remotely or pivot in any way, or have you literally just had to close the doors and that is it?
Yeah, we completely shuttered the doors, so we haven't had anything going on in the venue since March the 14th last year. You know, we were lucky enough to receive a Arts Council Cultural Recovery Fund grant, and that's allowed us to undertake some activities which have supported some of the staff predominantly the videographers, the graphic designers, the lampies, the sound guys, and the creative team to be able to put some streams and some events on supporting artists in different venues that are also shuttered across London rather than just our own. But normal activity and anything that we've been able to do within the venue just hasn't taken place since March last year.
And Tom, you know, there's been a really interesting response to this, because we've been told, you know, oh look, you know, this study shows that people support it. You've had other people say, well, it doesn't really affect me, I don't really want to go to a nightclub, so I don't really care. But then we hear people like this, and the previous guest as well, explaining the impact on their industry, their staff, in fact their own mental well-being as well, has been devastating.
Absolutely, and nightclubs, the whole business model is about bringing people together, often incredibly close together, in enclosed spaces. It's the antithesis of a COVID-secure activity. It's something that the virus loves, and it's the industry that's probably been hit one of the hardest of all of those industries. It's very hard to adapt, and so it must be incredibly frustrating that there's not much further support that the government's bringing forward for these 4 weeks. Of course, what the government would say is that the vast majority of people in the country support this move, that saving potentially thousands of lives should come before saving maybe thousands of businesses. It's a very difficult balance to strike, but ultimately that furlough payment is going through right through to September. The change to it that happens next month is that employers contribute 10%. Now that's going to be very, very hard for some firms, but I think the government feels that that's not going to be utterly impossible. And it does sort of lay credence to what Rishi Sunak did in the first place, making sure that furlough went longer than was needed, so that it does cover that period to a greater extent.
Cameron, I think that I can see you shaking your head there. Do you disagree?
I do. I just don't think this is looking at it in a real life context at all. I mean, these are businesses that have started in absolute earnest to be able to relaunch. Now, the furlough system, when it was set up, it was covering existing staff. Now, we've taken on from what was a team of nearly 5 in November back up to a team of 130 that are being trained. Now, I'd probably say 80% of those we can't furlough. So it's a system that isn't set up to be able to support the businesses that are just about to relaunch again. So it's all well and good, Mr. Gove, rolling out that, this was something that they had in mind. It wasn't. He's just playing political games there in trying to spin something. And yet again, a sector like ours is being completely overlooked because the government don't want to extend any sector-specific support. So we're having to make do with systems that are not set up and not suitable for a sector that's still completely shuttered.
So Cameron, what is it? You say you're not happy with what Michael Gove, for example, has just been discussing and proposing. What do you want the government to do?
Well, for a sector like ours, I mean, for a start, we'd like to see an extension, or I would like to see I'm not talking on behalf of the whole sector, so I can only talk on behalf of my business, that when we are able to open, that there will be an extension for, or starting off now, an extension of the furlough scheme that can cover staff that we've taken on in good faith to be able to reopen, that we will be able to get support to try and keep those people that we've pulled across from other jobs, to come and work for us with a view that we were obviously going to be able to reopen. We're going to have the rates holiday extension will start tapering down from 100 to 60% next month in July, and we still aren't open. You've got the VAT rent reduction, which applies to pre-sale tickets, but not actually tickets on the door. So I would like to see that, moved over so that we will be able to have some time to be able to repair the balance sheets, to make up for some lost time, some working capital support and grants that can be accessed by businesses like ours to be able to support us in this interim period.
So if you don't get any of the things you've just described, and indeed the situation stays as Michael Gove is saying it's going to, how much longer in these circumstances will your business survive, Cameron?
Well, I mean, I couldn't tell you exactly, because we're going to be okay to get through the 4 weeks. Now, if there's a significant change on that 4 weeks, then I honestly can't tell you, what's going to necessarily happen to us. just like I can't imagine there will be too many else in the industry that are going to be able to go for the next month just on some kind of sleep mode or standby mode, waiting for the news as to whether they can be good to go. And when we are good to go, these kind of operations are supremely complex. You've got a lot of people that are having to work in very, very challenging environments, undertaking very complex licenses. You can't just flick a switch. So you have to have well-trained staff ready to go. And I'm afraid these sorts of things just don't happen overnight. So I can't tell you beyond the 4-week period what's going to happen both to any other business in the interim and certainly what's going to happen to us beyond 4 weeks.
And Tom, you heard then Cameron saying he wants basically more government support. Michael Gove today suggesting that's not going to happen. Do you think the government would change their position at all financially and listen to people like Cameron and alter the support package between now and July the 19th?
It's heartbreaking to hear, isn't it? Because it does seem just deeply unfair. If the government is telling what would be a viable business in normal circumstances that they can't do business and then is not going to offer them any extra support, it does just reek of unfairness, and that's a real problem. I think the real issue here, though, is that there's so little time to get stuff organised to not only campaign but also implement potential solutions. And I think that if the delay were longer than 4 weeks, there would be a lot more pressure to do something about this real problem. But the fact of the matter is that this delay could be as short as 2 weeks with that break clause that the Prime Minister announced last night. And so the pressure, I think, just won't get to the point where the government feels like it needs to bend.
And Cameron, final point to you, if I may. Let's just finish this interview by just summing up in a couple of words how you feel right now.
I'm pretty balanced about things. I mean, we've been planning things all day today. We've just got to get on and deal with it. And I think one thing that a lot of my peers and people in our team have dealt with some pretty tough stuff in the last year and some real sort of bumps in the road as we've tried to understand and navigate what's ahead. So, we'll get on and do that. But I look across countries like Germany and see the kind of protection and support that the nighttime economy is given and the way that it's treated as a really important sector. And I look on with envious eyes because I don't feel that's the case here in the UK at all.
Okay, well, Cameron Leslie, co-founder of Fabric there. I'm pleased you're balanced. I hope it continues and I wish your business well when it reopens. Thank you for your time, and Tom Harwood, thank you too.